In 2018, an article by Paul D. Polycoronis was published, and he stated that the ethical principle of client autonomy or self-determination in terms of client choice and control over what happens with their private information is what makes the ethical principle of confidentiality so important. The ACA Code of Ethics states that clients have the right to confidentiality and that the counselors must discuss the required limitations to confidentiality when working with clients. Counselors should also explain what type of information and with whom the information is shared with at the beginning of the counseling sessions. It should also include the purpose, the goals, the techniques that the counselors will use, the procedures and the limitations and the potential risks that could happen in the counseling sessions, and the benefits of these services. The counselor qualification and credentials should be listed in the informed consent form, and also should have, in case of the counselor's death, what would happen with the continuation of services for the client and what the protocol is for that. I live in the state of North Carolina, so my regulations could be different than other states, but for North Carolina, for an informed consent form, it should include the confidentiality and acquiring required signatures on intake forms, like the consent to treat, to release information, and consent to treat minors. It also should go over computer security and fees and financial agreements. It should also discuss the possibility of technology failure and alternate means of communication if the technology failure occurs. It should also identify an appropriately trained professional who can provide local assistance, including crisis intervention. And the consent form that I found online was from the Counseling Connection in Charleston, West Virginia. And the first thing you read in the consent form is that the staff has legal and ethical obligations to obtain consent form before initiating services, except for in a case of an emergency. The form goes over confidentiality and goes over why the counselor might go against the confidentiality. It goes over supervision and consultation and why might the supervision be included in the supervisor be included in the cases. It goes over electronic communication and the effectiveness and the risks of it, which is what NC requires, is to go over the risk of electronic communication and the effectiveness of it. This consent form that I found also goes into how the counseling and therapy works and the outcome that it can result in. It also talks about the possible risks that are associated with counseling. It also lists out the types of therapy that can take place in these sessions. It also gives information about all the counselors and their credentials that work there. It states that it is not an emergency mental health service, so in case of an emergency, the client and their family should call 911. It also states that clients have the access to their records unless, in rare situations, with the counselor denies that access to reduce the risk of harm to them or others. It also talks about the billing and fees that are required for the services and what the fees might be if the client was to miss an appointment. For the requirements of North Carolina and the ACA Code of Ethics, the consent form I found had all those requirements. The only thing that I did not see was in the result of death of the counselor, what the protocols are for that. An ACA Code of Ethics recommend having that listed in the case of that situation. My question is that is there a specific or better way to make sure that the clients understand the consent form? Should we go through it with them or give it to them and expect them to read all of it? Because I know that I wouldn't read all of a consent form. So I just want to know if that would be better to go over it with them. Thank you.